Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of the Mission Matters Money Podcast, your source for all things money. My name is Adam Torres. You can follow me on Instagram at AskAdamTorres. Keep up with my book releases, book tour schedule, signings, all that other good stuff. Always love to connect with you there. And as always, if you'd like to apply to become a co-author of one of my upcoming books, just head on over to the website, missionmatters.com, and click on Become an Author to apply. All right, today I have Logan Freeman on the line, and he is co-founder and principal over at FTW Investments. He's owner over at Live Free Investments, and he's also host of the Live Free Investors podcast. Logan, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, man. I'm so energized, thriving, and focused to be here.
Oh, man, love having other podcasters on the line because it makes my job easy. So thank you there, Logan. But and we're going to get into your podcast and some of the other things you're doing. But before we do that, I do want to talk more about what you're doing over at Live Free Investments. Tell us a little bit more about your company, please.
Absolutely. It's my mission and passion in life to help people do more of what they love to do. And the vehicle I use to help people do that is investing into commercial real estate. So we do two things, and we're really focused on the Kansas City, Missouri market. Not a lot of people know that Kansas City is in Missouri. It's not in Kansas. There is a Kansas City, Kansas, but there's nothing over there. So come to Missouri if you guys fly in. And we can help people actively buy properties if they want to be the sponsor of their own projects, or we put together our own passive syndications to allow people to get all the same benefits of investing into real estate with none of the hassle. So no toilets, no tenants, no trash. Those are the two things that we do here at Live Free Investments.
Man, that's awesome. And I think that's a great transition to today's topic. So how to help out-of-state investors set up a team and a new market. And I know you work with a lot of out-of-state investors. So where do you want to start with this topic?
You know, I think that you need to start with the mindset first. And I try to take the approach that Stephen Covey teaches in his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. One of those habits is starting with the end in mind. And so instead of just selling somebody real estate, selling them a position in a syndication, I try to learn about what somebody's actually trying to accomplish. And a lot of times what I learned throughout that process is they might be trying to accomplish passive income, but they're actively looking to buy real estate. And I make sure I create a delineation between the two. So I take somebody's approach, what they think their approach might be, help them understand that there's different structures for them, and then put them in the right one, or at least point them in the right direction. So the mindset and the goal, starting with the end in mind, is by far the first step that we have to go through.
So I know this is going to vary from investor to investor, client to client, obviously. But where do you find a lot of people, make the mistake when they start trying to go out of state? Because sometimes you hear like great stories, and some people are like, oh, I love it, great, have excellent things, and then other people are always like, oh, I'll never do it again. Like where do you find some of those common themes of errors come from?
Well, there's two schools of thought here. Right? There's the school of thought that you get started small and you learn your way through it. And then there's the other school of thought that you jump into something larger. And I'm somewhere in between. Robert Kiyosaki said there's actually three sides to the coin. There's heads, there's tails, but then there's the edge. I'm always on the edge. Wayne Dyer taught me to be open to everything, attached to nothing. So I'm always open to different people's perspectives. With that being said, I think the biggest mistake that I see is paralysis by analysis. And what I mean by that, the internet has blown up the commercial real estate world, the education space, and all of that is fantastic. However, when you get into the nuts and bolts of actually completing your first transaction, there is so much that goes into that most people actually end up staying on the sidelines and never pulling the trigger. So the biggest mistake that I see is somebody trying to do everything themselves. Tim Coleman talked about the sweet spot. It's that intersection of your greatest strength and your greatest passion. I try to help people understand what that sweet spot is and then push more of their activity into that sweet spot. So if somebody has all the time in the world, they have capital, they have connections, and they want to do this full time, then by all means, go do a project yourself. But if you're a busy professional, you have kids like I do, a wife, a husband, full-time job, and you're just trying to get an allocation into commercial real estate, maybe buying a property and being the sole owner of it isn't the right fit. And so a lot of times I think the paralysis by analysis happens because there's information overload instead of being able to focus on that zone of mastery. And so I help people understand what that zone of mastery is and then actually start to scale that. That would be my response to kind of the biggest mistake that I see that's happening on a regular basis.
What are some things that people should think about or look at when they're shopping for a syndicator or looking to join in on somebody else's deal out of state? Because that's another thing, is that some people know they need to work with somebody else and they want somebody else to do it, but they just don't know where to start in their due diligence.
Yeah, I would say there's a couple things to that question. And the first being that behind all real estate is people. And so we have a book club that we're going through right now it's a book that we're going through. It's called Sizing People Up, how an FBI negotiator understands who's telling the truth and who's not. You have to have a level of relationship and trust with the person that you're working with. And trust is kind of this buzzword that is out there, but trust is equal to me, accountability and consistency. And if you have accountability and you have consistency, you say you're going to do what you're going to do and you actually do that and you show up on a regular basis, that's when you start to build that trust. And so I am extremely vulnerable and open and authentic to all of our investors, because this is not a one-time deal and you're not talking to me for a long time. This is a 10-year, sometimes 15-year relationship that's being built. So if you're shopping around, one, you need to learn about the markets and the different markets that you want to get in. After you've done that, then it's time to find the people that you feel comfortable with. There's been people that have invested in Kansas City that I've talked to that we just weren't a fit. The values weren't aligned. Their goals I didn't think were maybe attainable. And so I said, hey, I don't think I'm the right person for you, but there's a lot of other people here that are. So I would recommend having a lot of different conversations with people that are doing what you're trying to accomplish in the space, and then see who takes a liking to you, right? See who you can start to relate to. See whose values align with yours. And that trust piece is crucial to finding somebody to actually work with.
That's awesome. Let's talk a little bit more about your podcast. So tell us a little bit more about the podcast. I love to promote other podcasters with great content. So tell my audience a little bit more about what they can expect when they check it out.
My podcast, I started, listening to podcasts 7 years ago when John Lee Dumas, Lewis Howes, these guys were the top dogs in the space, and they very well still might be. Pat Flynn was in there as well. And I listened to a lot of these podcasts, and what I learned from them was, unless you have a lot of downtime, maybe you have drive time, maybe you have some yard work or gym that you're doing a workout in, unless you have that time, it's very difficult to get an hour-long podcast in. So similar to yours, my podcast is literally trying to give somebody, the listener, one piece of golden nugget that they can take and then go implement throughout the day. So the Live Free Investors podcast is simply a 10-minute podcast that has really A-class people, high achievers on the podcast that are sharing, 5 questions, answers to 5 questions that allows them to just give one piece of advice out of those 5 questions that somebody can then go implement throughout the day. So it's a bite-sized chunk, and I hope that it's packed with value for the people that are listening. But
man, that's awesome. So Logan, if somebody's listening to this and they want more information on Live Free Investments or your podcast, or to follow your work, or heck, you got a book club. I mean, you got so many things going, I can't keep up. I mean, what's the best way for people to connect with you and to engage with you in your content?
Well, you could definitely keep up, Adam. I know that you can. So, but the best way to connect with me is probably on LinkedIn. I'm the most active on the platform, Logan D. Freeman. But you can also visit my website, livefreeinvestments.com. There's an easy way to contact me there, and that goes directly to my inbox, and a lot of people reach out to me there as well.
Fantastic. Well, Logan, really appreciate you coming on the show today and sharing more about all the great things that you're doing over at Live Free Investments and your podcast. I mean, all great work coming out of you. And to the audience, as always, thank you for tuning in. Hope you got a lot of value out of this. If you did, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, leave me a review in the Apple iTunes store. And if you're watching this on our YouTube channel, Mission Matters Money, definitely give us a subscribe there, but also leave us some comments in the video. Love to know what kind of projects and things that you're working on. And Logan, thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.